Mr. Gavin, I have some unfortunate news regarding your sister's graduation next week. Patricia from Premier Celebrations sounded tense on the phone. Your mother called yesterday and asked us to remove her name from the guest list. She said there was a family dispute and that her presence would not be welcome. I stopped reviewing the Sterling Event Holdings contracts and leaned back in my chair on the 42nd floor of my office. Through the panoramic windows, I could see the entire city of Boston, where half of the commercial buildings housed companies that were part of my portfolio. Go on, Patricia. Well, sir, there's more. Your mother also asked if the family could keep the $50,000 deposit you paid for the event. She said they've already spent the money on other graduation expenses. For a moment, I was silent. My name is Gavin, and at 30 years old, I have built an events and hospitality empire valued at $2.8 billion. My family had no idea. To them, I was still the Harvard dropout who wasted his life 9 years ago. Mr. Gavin? Are you there? I'm here, Patricia. Tell me, what is the name of the company organizing my sister Jessica's graduation? Premier Celebrations, sir. And who is the owner of Premier Celebrations? I heard papers being shuffled. Sterling Event Holdings. And who is the owner of Sterling Event Holdings? A longer pause. Sterling Hospitality Group. That's right. And I'm Gavin Sterling, CEO and sole owner of Sterling Hospitality Group. So yes, I can cancel this graduation. In fact, let me be more specific. Cancel the reservation at the Grand Harbor Ballroom as well. It's mine. The catering company, Symphonic Deluxe? Mine. The photography service, Lens Master Studios? Mine too. Mr. Sterling, I didn't know you were. There's more, Patricia. The hotel where the relatives are staying, Harborview Resort, is mine. The Prestige Limousines transportation service they hired? Mine. Even the elite glamour beauty salon where Jessica got her nails done yesterday afternoon. Guess who it is? I could hear her heavy breathing. Sir, the graduation is in a week. There are 200 guests. All the deposits have already been paid by family members for lodging. Cancel everything. Refund any deposits paid by guests for accommodations. Send the Morrison and Sterling families a bill for the total amount they owe, minus my original $50,000, which I'm keeping as a cancellation fee. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. 9 years of building an empire while my family saw me as the failure who dropped out of college to play businessman. They had no idea that the little event business I casually mentioned at family dinners had become one of the largest hospitality corporations on the East Coast. My cell phone vibrated with a message from my mother. Gavin, we think it would be best if you did not attend Jessica's graduation. Your behavior lately has been unacceptable. We're keeping the money you contributed, since we spent it on other things. I smiled and typed, understood. Enjoy the celebration. What my family didn't know was that I had started Sterling Events in my one-bedroom apartment after leaving Harvard, not because I was failing, but because I identified a gap in the luxury events market. While they saw my decision as giving up, I was betting everything on my vision. For the first 2 years, I worked 18 hours a day, sleeping on the couch in my office. My family's response? Gavin is going through a phase. He'll be back in a real job soon. In my 3rd year, I bought my first property, a struggling event venue. My family remained focused on Jessica, who was following the traditional path through medical school. If you're wondering how this story of family underestimation will end, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened in the next few hours completely changed the dynamics of our family. 30 minutes after my conversation with Patricia, my phone rang. But what they didn't know yet was that canceling graduation would be just the beginning of the biggest lesson in family respect this town had ever seen. Gavin, my father's voice was tense and confused on the phone. I just got a call from some woman saying Jessica's graduation venue has been canceled. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, Dad. What do you mean, no mistake? This is ridiculous. We have a contract. A contract with Sterling Event Holdings, which is owned by Sterling Hospitality Group, which is owned by me. I kept my voice calm as I watched the movement on the street below. The company you hired to organize Jessica's prom is mine. The silence on the line stretched out for several seconds. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, trying to process information that defied 9 years of assumptions about his failure of a son. Gavin, what are you talking about? You organize birthday parties. I almost laughed. After 9 years, he still thought I organized children's parties. Dad, I own Sterling Hospitality Group. We control 47 event venues, 23 restaurants, 12 hotels, 6 catering companies, and 11 event service providers in 7 states. We generated $0.2 billion in revenue last year. That's impossible. Check our corporate website. Look up the business registration. Look up the Forbes list of fastest-growing private companies. We ranked 17th last year. I heard muffled conversations in the background. Mom had joined the call, as she always did when there was a family crisis to manage. Gavin, my mother's voice trembled over the line. We don't understand any of this. You never told us you were successful. The statement hit me like a punch in the stomach. 9 years. 9 years of trying to share my successes at every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every obligatory Sunday phone call. 9 years of being interrupted, dismissed, or redirected to conversations about Jessica's real accomplishments in medical school. I tried to tell you, I replied, feeling the old frustration rise in my throat. At every family gathering for the past 9 years, I tried to share what I was building. But you dropped out of Harvard to build this empire, Dad said, finally beginning to connect the dots. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. While Jessica was studying anatomy, I was writing contracts that generated millions in revenue. While you were worrying about her grades, I was buying properties and turning failing businesses into thriving companies. The irony was delicious and bitter at the same time. For 9 years, they had treated me like the problem child, the dropout who wasted his education and potential. Meanwhile, I had quietly built an empire that touched their lives in ways they could never imagine. I vividly remember Christmas 3 years ago when I casually mentioned that I had purchased Harborview Resort. Mom had patted me on the shoulder and said, "I'm glad you're keeping yourself busy, dear." Then she immediately changed the subject to talk about how Jessica had landed a coveted position in the residency program. The Harborview Resort. The same place where they had celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary last year, raving about the impeccable service and breathtaking view. They had no idea that their failure of a son had designed every aspect of that experience. Gavin, my mother's voice rose. Surely we can work this out. Jessica's graduation is only a week away. You excluded me from the graduation while you waited to get my $50,000. You made it clear that my presence would somehow diminish your perfect family celebration. We didn't know the money came from you, Dad said quickly. You didn't know because you never asked. Just like you never asked about my business, my life, or anything else. You just assumed I was the failure of the family and moved on. The truth was even more painful than I had admitted to myself. For years, I had watched Jessica receive every ounce of attention, support, and recognition from the family. Her every achievement was celebrated, her every challenge met with unconditional emotional and financial support. Meanwhile, my attempts to share business milestones were met with polite smiles and quick changes of subject. When I mentioned acquiring the coastal elite restaurant chain 2 years ago, Dad had asked when I would get a real steady job. Coastal Elite. The same chain where they dined regularly, always praising the quality of the food and the exceptional service. Marcus, I heard my mother whisper to my father, does he really own all those companies? Marcus. My father had never called me by my full name, Marcus Gavin Sterling, always preferring the childhood nickname that had stuck since I was a kid. Even now, at 30, running a business empire, I was still just Gavin to them, the boy who dropped out of Harvard and never grew up. Jessica is devastated, Mom said, her voice now laden with the emotional manipulation I knew so well. This graduation is the most important moment of her life. Would you really do this to your own sister? The question perfectly revealed the dynamics of our family. Jessica was always her own sister when they needed something from me, but I was apparently not her brother when it came to inclusion in family celebrations. I would do that to a family that excludes me while secretly benefiting from my success, I replied. You wanted to keep me out of Jessica's celebration while using my money to fund it. That's exactly the dynamic that has defined our family for years. What they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that my exclusion wasn't just about one event. It was about a decade of systematic invalidation, of being treated like an inconvenient appendage to the perfect family success story. My phone vibrated with another call. Amanda, again. Dad, I have to take this. I have a business to run. Gavin, wait. I switched to the other line. Amanda. Mr. Sterling, I've been getting calls all morning. Your brother, your parents, even the graduate's family. Everyone is asking about rescheduling. And sir, with a week's notice, it's impossible. Every quality venue in the area is completely booked. What about Grandview Manor? That's also one of your properties, sir. And it's already booked for this weekend, correct? Then they'll have to find another solution. Mr. Sterling, your mother called crying. She said there are 200 guests, family flying in from all over the country. She's begging for any solution. I considered this for a moment. Any solution. All right. Here's what we'll do. They can have the graduation at Grandview Manor, my smallest venue. Maximum capacity for 80 people at the reception. Basic catering package. Flowers from the house. Staff photographer only. Total cost, $200,000, paid in advance. Sir, that's 4 times what they were paying before and half the space. That's the offer. They wanted to exclude me from their celebration while keeping my money. Now they can include me in their decisions while paying market rates. I hung up and went back to work, but my mind continued to process 9 years of systematic exclusion. 9 years of being the asterisk in the Sterling family success story. What happened over the next 3 hours would forever change the dynamics of our family. And finally, they would discover the true cost of underestimating the son they never really knew. 3 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was Jessica, my sister. Gavin, her voice was shaky, charged with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I need to talk to you. Can I come to your office? Sure. I'm at Sterling Tower, 42nd floor. There was a long pause. Sterling Tower? The tallest office building in Boston. It's where Sterling Hospitality Group's main office is located. My God, Gavin. I didn't know. 40 minutes later, Jessica was standing in the doorway of my office, looking around with an expression that was a mixture of amazement and something that looked like guilt. The space took up the entire floor, with panoramic views of the city and decor that had been featured in Architectural Digest the previous year. Sit down, Jess. She settled into the Italian leather chair, still taking in the details, the contemporary sculptures, the original paintings, the conference table where I closed million-dollar deals. Gavin, I need to apologize. For everything. For all these years. Go on. Mom called me this morning. She was hysterical, talking about you owning companies, about canceling my graduation. Jessica paused, wiping her eyes. So I did my own research. Sterling Hospitality Group. Forbes. Business Weekly. You're not just successful, Gavin. You're a business legend. The irony was almost funny. My sister, who had spent 9 years seeing me as the failure of the family, was now sitting in the office that ran a $2.8 billion empire. Why didn't you ever tell us the truth? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Jess, I tried to tell you. At every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call. But you were always too busy celebrating your accomplishments to hear mine. She closed her eyes, and I saw tears streaming down her face. I remember now. You mentioned buying Harbor View Resort. I thought you were exaggerating, fantasizing about having money. Harbor View Resort, where you celebrated our parents' anniversary last year. Where Dad said it was the best-run place he'd ever visited. Oh my God. The realization hit Jessica like a wave. How many times did we belittle his accomplishments while benefiting from them without knowing? The question hung in the air between us. It was deeper than she realized. It wasn't just the physical properties. For years, I had used my network to open doors for Jessica in medical school. Letters of recommendation from renowned doctors who were clients of my hotels. Scholarships from foundations I quietly funded. Jess, do you remember the research grant you received in your junior year of college? The one that covered all your tuition. She nodded slowly. The Sterling Foundation for Medical Education. That's mine. The silence stretched out for almost a full minute. Jessica was processing 9 years of incorrect assumptions, 9 years of condescending treatment toward a brother who secretly financed and facilitated her success. Gavin, I'm a terrible person. No, Jess. You just saw what you wanted to see. I was the Harvard dropout, so I had to be a failure. It was easier to believe that than to question your own perceptions. But why did you keep helping? Why didn't you confront us, force us to see? The question touched on something deep that I rarely allowed to surface. Why had I continued to be the invisible brother, the secret benefactor, the unrecognized success? Because you're my family, I replied simply. And I believed that eventually you would see who I really was. Jessica stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Mom said you canceled everything. The graduation, the hotel, everything. I canceled it. And offered an alternative for $200,000? I did. She turned to face me. Gavin, we don't have $200,000. Not even close. My roommate's family contributed $50,000 for the party. Mom and Dad spent their savings. I used all my residency money. I know. Then you know we can't afford it. I know that too. Jessica returned to the armchair, her expression changing from guilt to something closer to despair. So there's no graduation. 200 people, family flying in from 3 different countries, all cancelled because, she stopped. Because you excluded me while you tried to get my money, I finished. Because for 9 years you treated me like a family burden while I quietly built the empire that supported your lives in ways you never imagined. You're right, she whispered. You have every right to be angry. But the issue was more complex than anger. Sitting there, watching my sister finally understand the magnitude of how our family had underestimated me, I felt something I hadn't expected, deep sadness. Not sadness for the revenge I was carrying out, but sadness for the years lost. For the family dinners where I tried to share genuine accomplishments and received polite smiles before they changed the subject to Jessica's grades. For the phone calls where I mentioned million-dollar acquisitions and heard, "That's great, honey," before a detailed discussion of the latest medical article Jessica had published. Jess, can I ask you an honest question? Sure. If I didn't have this money, if I were really the failure you all thought I was, would you still have excluded me from your graduation? The question made her visibly uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to respond, closed it, tried again. I don't know. Probably. We thought you were being negative about Mom's relationship with my roommate's family. We thought your presence would create tension. And now I realize that you were trying to protect us from people who were taking advantage of our generosity. That you saw things we couldn't see because we were too busy judging you. That's when I made my final decision. Not about canceling the prom, that was already decided. But about what kind of lesson my family needed to learn. I picked up my phone and dialed Amanda. Amanda, change of plans for the Sterling family prom. Yes, sir. My sister Jessica is here with me right now. She understands the situation completely. So here's the new offer. She can have her prom at the Grand Harbor Ballroom, the original venue, with the entire package you originally planned. Jessica looked at me with growing hope. But, I continued, there are 3 non-negotiable conditions. First, I want a public and formal apology from the entire family. Second, my invitation must be restored, not as a courtesy, but because they genuinely want me to be there. Third, they have 24 hours to decide. And if they don't accept the conditions? Asked Amanda. Then they'll find out how to organize a prom for 200 people in 5 days, without connections in the luxury events industry. I hung up and looked at Jessica, who was staring at me with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Would you really do that? Would you cancel my graduation if they didn't apologize? Jess, for 9 years you canceled my inclusion in this family. Now you know what it's like to be on the outside, watching decisions being made about important events in your life. But what if they're too proud to apologize? I smiled, looking out the window at the city I had helped shape through my investments and properties. Then they'll find out that pride is a very expensive luxury. And that underestimating people has real consequences. What Jessica didn't know yet was that I had already made a final decision about the future of our family dynamic. And in the next 24 hours, They would find out exactly how much power they had given to the son they had always considered a failure. 24 hours. That was the time I had given my family to decide whether they valued their pride more than Jessica's graduation. While they processed their limited options, I was in my office finalizing the details of a plan that had begun to form the moment I heard her mother excluded you from the event. Amanda called at 9 in the morning. "Mr. Sterling, your family is desperate. Your mother called 3 times last night, crying. She wants to know if there's any way to negotiate the terms." "What terms does she want to negotiate?" "She said she'll make the apology private, but asked that it not be made public. Said it would be too embarrassing in front of the 200 guests." I smiled as I watched the morning traffic move through the city. Even now, facing the complete cancellation of Jessica's graduation, my mother was still concerned with appearances. "Amanda, tell my mother that the conditions are non-negotiable. A public apology, my invitation reinstated, an acknowledgement that they misjudged me. All of that or nothing. And if they don't accept, then Jessica graduates in the university auditorium with a cocktail reception in the cafeteria. Simple as that." 3 hours later, my father called directly. "Gavin, your ultimatum is cruel. Jessica has nothing to do with this." "Dad, Jessica has everything to do with this. She was complicit in the decision to exclude me. She knew I had contributed financially and still agreed to keep me out of the celebration. She's your sister. And I'm your son. Or at least I should be." There was a long pause. "What do you want us to do, Gavin? Humiliate ourselves publicly?" "I want you to do exactly what you've done to me for 9 years, acknowledge the truth publicly. The difference is that my truth is about success, not failure. And if we do that, if we accept your conditions, then Jessica will have the graduation she's always dreamed of. In the Grand Harbor Ballroom, with all the trimmings, at no additional cost." "No additional cost? But you said $200,000. "That was if you continued to treat me like the family ATM. If you treat me like family, I'll treat you like family." After hanging up, I called my legal assistant. "Robert, I need you to draw up some documents. Confidentiality agreements for certain Sterling Hospitality Group employees. And I want a full audit of all financial contributions I've made to my family over the past 5 years." "May I ask why, sir?" "Because tomorrow night, in a room full of 200 people, my family is going to learn exactly who Gavin Sterling is. And I want every number to be irrefutable." What my family didn't understand was that the apologies were just the beginning. For 9 years, they had systematically underestimated me. For 9 years, I had quietly financed aspects of their lives they didn't even know about. The discoveries Robert would make over the next few days would shock them. The full scholarship Jessica received for her first year of college? I financed it through an anonymous foundation. The loan with impossible interest rates my parents took out to renovate the house? I guaranteed it through one of my companies. The special deal car Jessica bought last year? I owned the dealership. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Jessica called personally. "Gavin, please. Accept a private apology. Mom is humiliated by the idea of apologizing in front of all the guests." "Jess, you humiliated me privately for 9 years. A public humiliation won't kill you. But it could destroy the family image." "What image? That I'm the failure and you're the star?" That image was destroyed the moment they found out who really pays the bills. This isn't about money. You're right. It's about respect. And you're going to learn in front of 200 people what it means to respect someone you've underestimated for nearly a decade. If you're following this family drama and want to see more stories of people who were underestimated but had the last word, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. At 11 o'clock at night, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "Gavin, it was my mother," her voice defeated. "We accept your conditions. We'll make the public apology tomorrow night." "And my invitation?" "Restored. You'll be introduced as the guest of honor." "An acknowledgement that you misjudged me?" "Yes. All of that." I hung up and looked out my office window at the city at night. In less than 24 hours, 200 people would discover that the failure of the Sterling family was actually one of the most successful people in the room. But what even my own family didn't suspect yet was that Jessica's graduation would be just the opening act. The real revelation would come when they discovered exactly how many aspects of her independent life I had quietly financed and facilitated over the years. Jessica's graduation took place on Friday evening at the Grand Harbor Ballroom. 200 people gathered in the main hall, including family members who had flown in from 3 different countries, college classmates, and local medical authorities. I arrived at 7:30, just as the cocktail reception was getting started. My family greeted me with tense smiles, still processing the reality that their failed son controlled every aspect of the celebration surrounding their lives. Gavin, my mother greeted me, her voice thick with barely concealed nervousness. You look radiant." "Thanks, Mom. Jessica looks beautiful tonight." My sister approached, stunning in her navy blue dress, but her eyes betrayed her anxiety. She knew that, in some way, tonight would be about more than her graduation. Gavin, about tonight's speech. "Don't worry, Jess. Everything will go perfectly." What she didn't know was that Robert, my legal assistant, had spent the last 2 days compiling a complete presentation. Not just about my business, but about every financial contribution I had quietly made to the family over the past 5 years. At 8:15, the Master of Ceremonies called everyone to dinner. The tables were elegantly set, overlooking the harbor through the panoramic windows. My table was in the center, next to the head table where Jessica sat with my parents. During the first course, I watched conversations being held around the room. Some guests whispered about the impressive venue, others commented on the exceptional quality of the food and service. What they didn't know was that they were praising my work. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Master of Ceremonies announced after dessert. "Before we introduce our honorary graduate, we have a special presentation from her brother, Gavin Sterling." I walked up to the small stage in the center of the hall, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the 200 faces facing me. My parents looked lost, Jessica was pale, and I could feel the tension spreading through the room. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Gavin Sterling, and I'm here to talk about my sister Jessica, but also about our family." I started with childhood memories, light-hearted stories that made the audience laugh and relax. Then gradually, I changed the tone. 9 years ago, I made a decision that my family considered a failure. I left Harvard Business School to start my own business. My parents thought I was throwing my life away. Jessica thought I was being irresponsible. A low murmur rippled through the room. Some guests began to lean forward, interested. During those 9 years, I built something that completely changed our lives. But my family never knew it, because they were too busy seeing me as a failure to notice my success. I paused, letting the silence settle. "Tonight, you are dining in the Grand Harbor Ballroom, owned by the Sterling Hospitality Group. The food you just enjoyed was prepared by Symphonic Deluxe Catering, also mine. The photography service documenting this evening? Lens Master Studios, my company." The silence in the room became absolute. I could see faces turning toward my parents, who seemed to be disappearing into their chairs. "Actually, let me be more specific about what the Sterling Hospitality Group represents." I motioned to Robert, who activated the projection on the wall behind me. The numbers appeared in large letters: 2.8 billion in total assets. 47 event venues, 23 restaurants, 12 hotels, 6 catering companies. We generated 1.2 billion in revenue last year and are the 17th fastest growing private company in the United States, according to Forbes. I heard someone sigh loudly. A woman at the back table said clearly, "Oh my God." But the story gets more interesting when we talk about how this has impacted our family over the years. The next slide showed a detailed list. Jessica turned visibly pale when she saw her name. Jessica received a full scholarship for her first year of medical school through the Sterling Foundation for Medical Education. A foundation I created and personally fund. Total value, $120,000. She put her hand over her mouth, realizing for the first time where her educational support had come from. The loan with almost impossible interest rates that my parents got to renovate the house 2 years ago? It was guaranteed by Sterling Investment Group, my capital company. They saved approximately $80,000 in interest. My parents looked at each other, clearly shocked. Dad whispered something to my mom that I couldn't hear. The car Jessica bought last year with that amazing special promotion? Sterling Auto Group owns 70% of the dealership. The promotion was specifically targeted at her. "Gavin, Jessica said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I didn't know. We didn't know. I know you didn't know, Jess. Because for 9 years you were too busy seeing me as a failure to notice that I was quietly supporting important aspects of your lives. The tension in the room was palpable. Some guests seemed fascinated, others uncomfortable with the public nature of the family revelation. Last week, I received a call informing me that I had been excluded from this celebration. My own family decided that my presence would be problematic, but that they could keep the $50,000 I contributed to the event. A shocked murmur rippled through the room. It was clear that most of the guests were unaware of the family dynamics that had led to this evening. So I did what any businessman would do. I canceled the entire event. After all, when you own all the supplier companies, you have that option. Nervous laughter echoed around the room. The story was taking a turn no one had expected. But tonight isn't about revenge. It's about family. It's about recognition. It's about realizing that success comes in many forms, and that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones we have the hardest time seeing clearly. I turned directly to my parents. Mom, Dad, you owe me an apology. Not just for excluding me from my graduation, but for 9 years of systematic underestimation. My father stood up slowly, his face red with embarrassment and emotion. Gavin, his voice trembled slightly. Before everyone here tonight, I offer you my deepest and most sincere apologies. We misjudged you, we underestimated your accomplishments, and we failed to recognize the extraordinary man you have become. My mother joined him, tears streaming down her face. Son, forgive us. We are deeply ashamed and proud of you at the same time. You are the greatest success in our family, and we were too blind to see it. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Some guests were visibly moved, others seemed to be processing the magnitude of the revelation they had just witnessed. Jessica stood up and walked to the stage. Gavin, she said, taking my hand. Thank you. Not just for the financial support we never knew came from you, but for never giving up on our family, even when we gave up on you. She turned to the audience. My brother is the most successful man I know, not just because of the businesses he has built, but because of the character he has maintained through 9 years of family disbelief. As the applause continued, I watched the complete transformation in our family dynamics happen in real time, in front of 200 witnesses. But what neither Jessica nor my parents knew yet was that the night was far from over. Because I had saved the most impactful revelation for last. The most shocking revelation, I continued, my voice echoing through the silent hall, is not about the money I spent on you secretly. It's about what I discovered when I began investigating our family finances. I motioned to Robert, who projected a new image onto the wall. It was a complex legal document, but the title was clear enough for everyone to read: Will of Harold Sterling, paternal grandfather. Our grandfather, who passed away when I was 17, left a significant inheritance for the entire family. $3,200,000, to be divided equally among his grandchildren when the youngest turned 25. Jessica turned pale. My parents looked at each other with expressions of growing panic. Jessica turned 25 2 years ago. According to the will, each of us should have received $1,600,000. A shocked murmur ran through the room. Some guests began whispering among themselves, clearly fascinated by the family drama unfolding before them. My parents controlled the will as executors. They told me that Grandpa had lost everything before he died, that there was no inheritance. My father stood up abruptly. Gavin, this isn't the time. Sit down, Dad, I replied calmly. This is exactly the time. The next slide showed detailed bank statements. For 9 years, while you treated me like a family failure, you used my share of the inheritance, $1,600,000, to finance Jessica's medical education, the renovation of the house, and various personal investments. The silence in the room was deafening. Jessica had her hands over her face, clearly processing the magnitude of the family betrayal. Technically, you stole from me. Legally, I can sue you for embezzlement and willful misrepresentation. Gavin, my mother finally spoke, her voice barely audible. We thought you wouldn't use the money responsibly. So you decided for me. You used my money to finance Jessica's dreams while telling me I was too irresponsible to deserve my own inheritance. The irony was delicious and bitter at the same time. They had used my own money to create the disparity that justified treating me as inferior. But here's the interesting part, I continued, smiling for the first time that night. You can keep the money. Jessica looked up, confused. What? $1,600,000? That's what my company makes in profit every 3 days. You can keep my inheritance. Consider it an investment in family education. I walked over to the table where my parents were sitting, my voice becoming softer but still audible to the entire room. For 9 years, you taught me that family love was conditional. That I had to prove my worth to be included. That success means conforming to your expectations. I took my mother's hand, which was shaking. But I've learned something different building my empire. I've learned that true success isn't about being accepted by people who underestimate you. It's about becoming so strong that their opinion becomes irrelevant. My father was crying openly now, something I had never seen before. Son, forgive us. Please. We've been wrong about everything. Dad, you've already been forgiven. The moment I decided to save Jessica's graduation instead of letting it fall apart, I forgave you. But forgiveness doesn't mean we're going back to the old ways. I returned to the center of the hall, turning my final attention to the guests. Tonight, 200 people have witnessed an important lesson about perception versus reality. About how our assumptions can blind us to the truth right in front of us. The family that thought they were protecting a successful daughter from a failed brother discovered that the failure had been secretly financing her success for years. I picked up my champagne glass from the table. So, here's to that. Not to revenge, but to redemption. Not to humiliation, but to recognition. And most of all, here's to families who learn to grow together even when they start out apart. The entire room rose to its feet, applauding. But my eyes were focused on my family, who slowly joined the toast, tears streaming down their faces. Later, as the guests were leaving, Jessica pulled me into a private corner of the hall. Gavin, what happens now? With our family, I mean. Now you know me for the first time in 9 years. The question is, do you like what you've found? We love you. And we're proud of you. Not just for your financial success, but for the man you've become despite how we treated you. And I love you too, Jess. That's why I never gave up. 2 years later, our family dynamic has been completely transformed. My parents consult me on important decisions, not because of my money, but because of the wisdom I've demonstrated. Jessica and I have developed a real partnership. She considers my opinion on her career, and I consider her perspectives on my business. Last week, I got a call from a young businesswoman whose family had excluded her from an important celebration after she secretly financed the event. She had watched Jessica's graduation video that circulated on social media. How did you manage to forgive your family? She asked. I didn't forgive them for their benefit, I replied. I forgave them for my own benefit. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. But how did you know they would change? I didn't. But I knew I would. And in the end, the only person you can really change is yourself. If this story of family triumph touched you and you want to see more stories of people who turned rejection into strength, subscribe to the channel. We have dozens of stories about people who were underestimated but had the last word. The most important lesson I learned is not that family is always wrong, or that money solves everything. It's that sometimes people need to see who you really are before they can love you properly. And when that finally happens, the reconnection is even deeper because it was earned through truth, not convenience. Today, when I look at Jessica's graduation photos, I see not just a celebration of academic achievement, but the birth of a family that finally learned to see each other clearly. The Harvard dropout became the quiet patriarch the family never knew it needed. And that's a legacy worth far more than $1.6 million.